Well, we still have an on-site before school, after school care service provider here for our families. Because, you know, when it comes down to it, we really regret the impact this has on our families and on our children. This is not about making it hard for them. This is actually about letting the government know that we're really serious about what's happening in education, and we're really worried about the future of education for our children.
Okay, regarding what you are after, and the money first of all, and I know your own school motto is aim high. Auckland Primary Principals Association immediate past President Kevin Bush says teachers need double at least what the government's offering. Is that a fair indication, Helen, of what teachers are saying they want?
I think that's a pretty fair indication. I think that what we've been offered is peanuts, really, and a bit of an insult to the work that teachers put into their profession, to the the way in which they regard their vocation, and when you pay peanuts, then you get monkeys, and we don't want the peanuts. We want good quality teachers in front of our classes, and we're looking closely at, in order to recruit the best quality people, you must remunerate them well.
Yes. Look, we've talked a lot about how teachers are overloaded on the panel over the years. But do teachers talk about those halcyon days when you were paid as much as backbench MPs before the Remuneration Authority started making its unchallengeable pronouncements?
Well, quite frankly, a lot of those teachers have moved on since those days.
It's a distant memory.
And yes, it is a distant memory, and we've got a much younger workforce now. The unfortunate thing is that this much younger workforce are smart enough to know, well, I'm not going to get paid very much. I'm working, all these long hours. They don't work from 9 till 3, as people seem to think. They work much, much longer hours. They've got classes that are made up of, in Auckland, around 50 to 70% of their classes are children with English as their second language.
Yeah.
They've got a high percentage of students with high needs, whether they are physical, mental, intellectual, or social needs within their classroom. So they're not just teaching reading, writing and maths. They're teaching social skills. They're teaching, sort of trying to incorporate languages into their programs that they were not trained for. So, sorry.
No, and I think we are aware of the broad nature of some of those new stresses as well as the growing traditional stresses. If teachers were paid as much as MPs again and had the sort of support that MPs have as well, what do you think we would see in terms of a revival of the profession?
Oh, we would get the quality people coming back into education. I'm not saying we don't have quality now. I'm saying to retain what we've got, we must look closely at what we pay them. We must look closely at the conditions in which we're expecting them to ensure positive outcomes for learners.
All right.
And we must look after their health and well-being.
Thank you, Helen Varney, on the panel. And Chris Gallivan has been with us today. Chris, thank you very much.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks, Linda.
Thanks, Chris.
Always a pleasure. And Linda Hallinan with me in Auckland. Thank you, Linda.
No worries.
Good luck with the plums book.
Yeah, I'm more annoyed about my peach blossoms.
Yeah.
No peaches.
We can tell you're annoyed about the peach
That's
blossoms.
a problem.
Thanks, everybody. The panel's back tomorrow and Checkpoint's here now.
Tō te maira e hoa mai he kōrero kei te haere hei kaupapa kei te karawhiua. Tonight on Checkpoint, Tuku Morgan pens a stinging attack on the Maori King and his chief advisor, Rangi Whakaruru. The letter criticises Mr Whakaruru's excessive salary and spending on business travel and a car. Also tonight, Go Bus boss Nigel Piper said this morning no bus driver earns $17 an hour. So what exactly are they earning? It's the latest political whodunit, the leak of details of a large travel bill by national leader Simon Bridges. Police investigate claims the Deputy Commissioner contacted a witness to a bullying incident he was involved in. A Tower insurance customer questions why his annual premium has increased by more than $10,000, and teachers prepare to strike.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, good afternoon. Ko Katrina Batten ho. A former advisor in the Kingitanga has unleashed a scathing attack on the Maori King Tuheitia. Tuku Morgan has written an email criticising King Tuhetia's leadership skills, calling him a puppet and a poor communicator. He's also taking a swipe at the King's chief advisor, Rangi Whakaruru, criticising his high salary, his spending and his management. The Kingitanga's Ururangi Trust is currently under investigation by the Serious Fraud Office. The Waikato Tainui MP, Nanaia Mahuta, says Mr Morgan was close to the King and the letter raises concerns.
Look, evidently he held a position of trust within the tribe, and on behalf of the Office of the King, those matters need to be resolved, and the tribe is looking seriously at many of the things that were said.
Nanaia Mahuta says the Serious Fraud Office will look into many more issues. The New Zealand First MP, Shane Jones, has taken a swing at the police over information being leaked to the media saying it's a mare's nest. His comments come less than a week before Wally Homaha's appointment as Deputy Police Commissioner is before an independent inquiry. The police are also investigating claims Mr Homaha contacted a witness to a bullying incident he was involved in. Shane Jones says the fact that so much information is dribbling out to the media from the police doesn't reflect well on them.
There's a lot of pressure there at the cops at the moment, but I don't know of a single MP who feels relaxed about the frequency of these leaks. And if I have the opportunity to reflect those concerns to the Commissioner, I will, because people are concerned out in the community. They've raised it with me.
Shane Jones. The 23-year-old man accused of a one-punch manslaughter has walked from court after the jury found him not guilty. Carlos Puller stood with his head bowed in the dock as the verdict was delivered at the High Court in Auckland today. Here's our court reporter Edward Gay.
The jurors took just 2 hours to return their unanimous verdicts this afternoon. The Crown argued Mr Puller was angry after having been punched by another partygoer in the early hours of a morning in August last year. He was looking to take his anger out on someone, and that someone was Reginald Sharma. Mr Puller's lawyer, Mark Edgar, said it was dark and everyone had been drinking. Mr Edgar said the two eyewitnesses could not be sure of what they said they saw. After the verdicts, Mr Edgar hugged members of Mr Puller's family in the public gallery. I Tamaki Makoto, ko Edward Gaiaho.
A Christchurch man says Tower Insurance may be trying to freeze high-risk properties out of the market by raising premiums. The country's third biggest insurer is using a fully risk-based approach, meaning hikes for people in areas with more risk of natural disasters. Roy Howe's premium shot up 440% to more than $12,000 after Tower decided his Strohan property is at a higher risk from earthquakes. He says Tower needs to have another look at its policy as this is out of order.
Tower have decided that instead of spreading the risk, that people in high risk areas are going to pay the high premium. I said, well, it's just unacceptable. I just can't believe that you expect somebody to fork out another $870 a month. You know, this will break a lot of people.
Roy Howell is paying considerably less since changing his insurer. Tower has declined to comment. Go Bus and the union for striking Waikato bus drivers will go to mediation on Friday. About 120 drivers are on strike over what they say are unfair pay and working conditions and unsafe buses. The company says it's made good pay offers and its buses are rigorously maintained and independently certified. The day-long strike affects Hamilton City and Te Awamutu and Otarahanga bus services. Drivers have been picketing the Hamilton Transport Centre and neighbouring streets, and First Union's Jax Oldham says there's been a lot of support from locals.
We've had lots of, beeping from trucks, other union members that are in different industries, and these drivers are really appreciative of all the support they're receiving.
Jax Oldham of First Union. The senior National MP Judith Collins says she'd be deeply surprised if any member of her caucus deliberately leaked information about the leader's expenses. A hunt is on to find out who leaked a large Crown limo travel bill for Simon Bridges, prompting blanket denials from National MPs. He's calling for a full-scale inquiry carried out by someone independent of Parliament and the government. Ms Collins agrees it should be investigated further.
Whatever should be done because it's just not acceptable for an opposition leader to be absolutely gazumped and sideswiped like this a week out from the reports being released.
Judith Collins. The Speaker says the format in which the documents was leaked meant it could not have come from his office. He's yet to decide whether a full investigation is needed. Thousands of parents are taking the day off tomorrow to cope with the strike by primary and intermediate school teachers. Principals say the strike will close most primary and intermediate schools, affecting more than 400,000 children. Parents have told RNZ News they're staying home to look after their children, though some are using grandparents or programs provided by after-school care groups. It's 5:05. Sport. The All Blacks say they're paying no attention to their prolonged dominance of Australia heading into Saturday's first Bledisloe Cup test in Sydney. The trophy has called New Zealand rugby headquarters home for the last 15 years, with the Wallabies unable to win 2 of the 3 annual matches during that period. But 71 Test veteran Ben Smith says the fact they've held the Bledisloe since 2003 means nothing come game day.
Yeah, I think that's irrelevant. I think you go back to last year, as I said, like the games that were played, especially that second test, they were tight games, and lucky that second one went our way, otherwise it could have been a bit different.
Ben Smith. The Wellington golfer Daniel Hiller is in a two-way tie for the lead after the first round of the US Amateur Championships. Hiller is trying to replicate the New Zealand PGA Tour player Danny Lee, who won the tournament in 2008. The event is being played at the famous Pebble Beach and Spyglass Hill courses on the Californian coast. And Scott Dixon's ability to win IndyCar championships was a driving force behind Chip Ganassi Racing's successful bid to sign the New Zealander on a multi-year contract extension. 4-time series champion Dixon has driven for the American team for the last 17 years and leads this year's standings with just 4 races remaining. Team owner Chip Ganassi says the 38-year-old New Zealander simply knows how to win.
He's the driver that if you were to take a stone and inject some brains into it, you'd chisel out Scott Dixon.
Chip Ganassi. That's the news.
Tenants fear being turfed out.
They feel unstable and in some cases even at risk of becoming homeless. And that's nothing to joke or laugh about.
Bus drivers walk off the job.
The bus fleet in New Zealand is incredibly poor as it is, without companies cutting corners even further.
And teachers go on strike.
There are some parents that have to pay for caregivers, and we thought that was a bit unreasonable. So that's why we provided a free daycare, really.
We're still here every weekday from 6. Morning Report with Susie Ferguson and Guy and Espiner. Then on 9 to noon, tackling burnout and spotting early warning signs of stress and mental illness among New Zealand's medical professionals. And after 10, rugby historian Ron Palensky sheds light on the controversial Keith Murdoch chapter of All Black history. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Met service weather through to midnight tomorrow, Northland to Waitomo, including Coromandel Peninsula, Bay of Plenty, Taupo and Taumaranui. Showers, some heavy and squally today with westerly gales this evening. Showers easing tomorrow, then becoming confined to the west coast. Taranaki to Manawa too, including Taihape. Rain developing this afternoon with heavy and possibly thundery falls. Rain easing to showers late tomorrow morning, then retreating to higher ground. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, scattered showers. Wairarapa, Kapiti and Wellington, also Buller, Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury. Areas of rain gradually clearing from the south tomorrow. Westland and Fiordland, occasional rain clearing from Westland this evening but returning late tomorrow. Otago and Southland, scattered rain clearing this evening or overnight, mainly fine tomorrow. And the Chatham Islands, mostly cloudy, light rain for a time tomorrow. It's 9 minutes past 5 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thanks very much indeed, Katrina, and thanks everyone for joining us. Coming up next, what are Go bus drivers actually paid? But first, a former kingitanga advisor has unleashed an unprecedented attack on the Maori King, Tuhetia. Tuku Roirangi Morgan has written a scathing email criticising King Tuhetia's leadership skills, calling him a puppet and a letdown. He's also taken a really pointed and detailed swipe at the King's chief advisor, Rangi Whakaruru, criticising his spending, his salary, his car, his travel and his management. It comes at a time when the King and his followers would expect to be celebrating just days before their annual coronation jubilee celebrations in Ngārawa Wahia. Our Māori news correspondent Lee Marama McLaughlin told me there have been ongoing issues with the kingitanga movement since Mr Morgan stepped down from his role as the King's advisor last year.
There's obviously some tension around him leaving the actual organisation. It feels like this has been years of resentment boiling over. Most of the letter, though, John, is actually attacking the chief advisor to the King, Rangi Whakaruru. He has a go at Mr Whakaruru's high salary, which is apparently $250,000. He claims that Mr Whakaruru took out a loan of $83,000, that he has these extended trips overseas that achieve nothing. He drives a luxury SUV. All Mr Morgan says are being funded by the King's Trust. All the while he says children in Ngaruawahia are going hungry. You'll know the trust at the moment, John, the Ururangi Trust, is currently being investigated by the Serious Fraud Office. That office actually raided the King's Waikato office, late last month, took documents, hard drives, and all of that is still ongoing. Now, Mr Morgan puts that whole investigation down to Mr Whakaruru's management and spending ways. He warns the King is doomed if he sticks with Mr Whakaruru and is calling really strongly to have Mr Whakaruru sacked.
Gosh, these are strong, serious and very specific allegations and accusations, Limarama. What are people saying about it?
Well, first and foremost, I tried to reach Tuku Morgan today. You know, why have you sent this letter? How are you feeling now that it's all off your chest? But he hasn't responded to any of my attempts to contact him. I've text messaged him, I've called him. I did get in touch with Sir Weta Gardner, who is acting as the communications advisor for the Kingitanga movement. He said because the Serious Fraud Office is investigating that they won't be making any comments about it. We did hear today from Nanaia Mahuta, the Maori Development Minister, the Waikato Tainui MP, who has strong ties to the Kingitanga. Look, she sounded really upset about the claims that have been made. She says she was at the hui that Mr Morgan talks about at the start of his letter, and she acknowledges that some things were said that related to the leadership of the Trust and that were referring to Mr Morgan himself. So sort of backs up the reason why Mr Morgan wrote the letter in the first place. She says that this has raised a lot of concerns, but that actually tribal members have had huge anxieties around the governance structures in place within the Kingitanga for quite some time. In the letter, there is also some discussion around former directors of the Trust, Tracy Haupapa from the Māori Federated Farmers, and Sir John Golter. Mr Morgan says that they lost their jobs as a result of Mr Whakaruru. So I spoke to them both today. Both of them were fairly tight-lipped about the claims made in the letter, but Sir John did say that these issues have been ongoing and he was not completely surprised by some of the points that have been raised in that letter. Wouldn't go further because the Serious Fraud Office is currently investigating. I got in touch with them. They were aware of the letter after I got in touch with them earlier today. They're interested in the details of the letter, but they wouldn't be clear on whether or not those details could be used as part of the investigation that's underway. And look, all of this days out from Waikato Tainui's social event of the year, the Koro Neihana, the coronation event. Come Friday, hundreds of people will be pouring into Ngaruawahia to celebrate King Tuheitia and the Kingitanga movement. It's 5 days of colour and vibrancy. Obviously that's going to be impacted by this. And I think a lot of people will be quite interested to see how the King reacts in that forum and whether or not he mentions anything about it in the speech that he generally gives at that event.
Limarama, one final question before you go, and that is Mr Whakaruru himself. Any word from him today?
No. So, look, we put all our feelers out there, the Māori News team here, to try and get in touch with him. When I got the reply from Sir Weta Gardner, I said to him, look, is Rangi commenting personally? And he said no. I'm responding on behalf of the King's office. And so I just put a cheeky question again and saying, look, can I get his number? But it looks like the King's office, which is encompassing of Mr Whakaruru, is not saying anything about this until the Serious Fraud Office investigation is complete.
Lee Marama McLaughlin speaking to us earlier. Obviously, we would love to talk to Mr Whakaruru about all of the allegations made by Mr Morgan. Quite extraordinary in their detail and the vociferousness with which they are made. It's 5:15, you're with Checkpoint on RNZ. As bus drivers in Waikato strike for better pay, there's confusion about what they do actually earn. Now, during an interview on Morning Report this morning, the employer, Go Bus, said no drivers earn $17 an hour. The union is adamant they do. And First Union is also adamant the lowest paid drivers are on school runs, therefore contracted to Go Bus and other companies by the Ministry of Education. The union says the ministry simply can't stand by and let drivers continue to earn so little. So what are they earning? Let's start with Nigel Piper on Morning Report, responding to union claims some drivers are being paid as little as $17 an hour.
No, we've got no one on $17 an hour.
That was Nigel Piper on Morning Report this morning. 2 hours later, Checkpoint was provided with an email from one source, then a payroll spreadsheet from another source containing the details of driver pay rates. So we called Nigel Piper back. Look, you said on Morning Report this morning that no one was earning $17 an hour. Is that correct?
That is correct. And to the best of my knowledge, we've got no one earning $17 an hour.
Right, because you sent an email yesterday morning at 9:52 to members of the First Union detailing the current rates, and you have new urban drivers at $17.35, school drivers, Waikato, Bay of Plenty, etc. at $17.68. So they are drivers earning $17 an hour, aren't they?
Well, I know I'm saying that I took the question to be, are they earning $17 an hour, as on 1700? In which case that is, I didn't look at it in terms of are they earning $17.35 or $17.68. I looked at 17 as in the number 17.
So do you have any drivers earning $17 or $17 something an hour?
Yes, we do. We've got drivers earning $17.35 an hour who are new entrant drivers, and we have school drivers earning $17.68.
And is that at odds with what you said on Morning Report this morning, do you think?
No, I don't believe so. The question was, have we got people earning $17 an hour? And I'm not trying to be clever here, but that's how I understood the question to be. Are they earning $17 an hour, or if they said to me, are they earning $17.68 or $17.35, I would have said yes. But if someone says to me the price is $17, I pay $17. And that's, in my head, how I interpreted that question.
So to clarify, Go Bus does indeed have drivers earning an hourly rate of $17 something, but not $17 exactly.
I took the question to be, are they earning $17 an hour, as on 1700?
And this afternoon we phoned First Union's Jax Oldham, who was with drivers in blustery conditions on the picket line.
So we're outside the Hamilton Transport Centre.
And you are with drivers who do both the school bus routes and the urban passenger routes?
That's correct.
And what's the pay scale there of the people you are representing at the picket line?
So it's anywhere between just over $17, and the kind of top rate I think is just on $19.
That's the top rate?
Yeah, that's the top rate. Not one member gets paid more than that.
We asked Jax to pass the phone to drivers on the picket line, and one by one I asked them what they're paid.
Around $17.60, $17.68.
And that's as a school bus driver?
School bus driver.
And you split shift?
Split shift.
So what hours do you drive, roughly?
I do 5.5 hours a day.
At $17.68, that's roughly $97 a day for 5.5 hours driving, but spread over roughly 11 hours. And that's what all the school bus drivers are earning.
Yeah, I just wanted to confirm with you that my hourly rate is $17.68.
Yeah, John.
How are you?
Good.
Good. What do you get paid?
$17.68.
And I get paid $17.68.
That's what the drivers say, and that's what the Go Bus paperwork we've received told us they're earning. Back to Nigel Piper. I'm looking because I've been leaked a payroll sheet. There's quite a lot of drivers I'm looking at now earning $17.68 an hour.
School bus drivers.
Yeah.
Yes.
Do you think that's an adequate wage?
I think it's a wage that is it's a wage that's been paid within the industry. Whether it's adequate, I don't know. It is an industry that's very competitive.
And that's true. As with the courier drivers we've been looking at on Checkpoint, transport operators often tender for jobs. And the cheaper the tender, the more chance they've got of winning contracts. With courier companies, that sees costs passed on to drivers wherever possible. Vans, uniforms, all the costs we've heard about. With bus companies, it often means low rates of pay. So it's the school bus drivers who, setting aside the learners, are your lowest paid drivers at $17.68.
From the top of my head, yes, that would be the case.
And you think that is adequate?
It's reflective of the market rate.
It is clearly at the low end of the market, but this is a low-paid market. And a salient fact about the drivers earning $17.68 is that they're school bus drivers. So in other words, these are often Ministry of Education contracts. Indeed, the Ministry's own website tells us
the Ministry of Education is the second largest provider of passenger services in New Zealand. This includes managing approximately 7,000 vehicle journeys each school day.
And Checkpoint has been told, after talking to operators, drivers and union reps, that school bus drivers do often earn near the bottom of the driver pay scale. Let's go back to Nigel Piper from GoBus.
Generally, that is the case. It's usually the cheapest, the lowest price conforming tender usually wins, and I think the government tendering rules require that. I mean, they're investing public money, I suppose, so they've got to do that.
Is the ministry satisfied with drivers earning $17.68 an hour to take children to and from school? We've gone to the ministry and we're awaiting an answer. But Jared Abbott from First Union says the ministry cannot continue to look the other way.
We've met with the Ministry of Education and have a really disappointing response from them. They seem completely oblivious to the moral obligations they have around these drivers. Bear in mind, these drivers, unlike other people employed by the Ministry of Education, like teachers who get paid during school breaks, the Ministry of Education drivers just get nothing. They get cut off like they're not even permanent employees during the school breaks. And the reality is that people on those school bus contracts are actually the most disadvantaged. These people are getting maybe 3 to 6 hours a day, having huge book-off times. They're dealing with a lot of children. You wouldn't put 30 children in a classroom and pay someone $17 an hour, but you put 30 children in a bus. The bus driver actually has a responsibility to focus on driving and getting the children somewhere safe. You've got all these children in the bus without seatbelts, unsupervised, no one to look over them, and the bus driver is required to do all of that work, but is actually paid like the worst workers in New Zealand.
It's Jared Abbott from the First Union. We went to the ministry. They've emailed us a statement. Head of Education Infrastructure, Kim Shannon, says the Ministry of Education contracts approximately 70 transport companies to provide transport services to assist students safely to and from school at a cost of around $185 million a year. Its present contract with GoBus has been in place since 2008, so that's a decade, and doesn't set any wage requirements above those set in law. The wage rates are agreed between employers and employees. It doesn't request or hold the breakdown of costs that go into pricing, such as staff pay rates or profit margins. It does seem to Checkpoint, though, that the lowest paid bus drivers across the board are driving school buses, as a general rule of thumb. And we are going to try and talk to the ministry at greater length and in greater detail about that. Just as an aside, Nigel Piper told Morning Report their drivers aren't earning $17 an hour. You heard his conversation with the guy, and they weren't. They were, in fact, on $17.68. So we asked Zach Fleming to find out what you can buy for that extra 68 cents if you're a school bus driver. Not much, as Zach found out.
Well, John, we went to Pack and Save in Tauranga to see just what you could get for 68 cents, and I can tell you that it's pretty hard to weigh anything in the pick and mix and exactly get out 68 cents, but we tried our best. For 39 cents I got 12 grams of almonds, which I can tell you is 19 almonds. So to get to 68 cents, maybe get 30 almonds there or so. So a wee little snack, that's not too bad. Also, just quickly for anyone watching who thinks is concerned about the amount of plastic here, all this plastic is recyclable and we will be recycling it. Brazil nuts, I got 7 grams of Brazil nuts for 41 cents. John, that's 3 Brazil nuts, so 68 cents splash out. You could probably get yourself a 4th Brazil nut there. The closest we came to 68 cents were caramel protein bites, and I can proudly say that I was able to get 2 caramel protein bites for 64 cents. These are pretty delicious here. Nice little snack for a bus driver. Figs, I went a little bit over the top, unfortunately. I got 2 figs here for 78 cents, so probably maybe 1 3/4 figs, though I'm not sure if Pack and Save would let you stand there with a knife and chop one up. Pecans, again, went a bit overboard. 12 grams of pecans for 83 cents, which is 5 pecans. I don't know if that would really sustain a Go bus driver in Waikato for very long, but there you go, 12 grams of pecans. And lastly, a little sweet thing for you, I was able to get 1 licorice all-sort, which that cost me 54 cents at 37 grams for that. So again, if you took in a knife there, you could probably get 1.5 licorice all-sorts.
Zach Fleming spending 68 cents. It's 26 minutes past 5. It's the latest political whodunit, the leak of details of a large travel bill by the National Party leader Simon Bridges. And as the spotlight shines on its own MPs, the National Party is now demanding a full-scale independent inquiry. Details of a large Crown limo bill for Mr Bridges were leaked to media, prompting questions about who was responsible and why exactly they leaked that information. Here's our political editor, Jane Patterson.
The latest update on MPs' expenses leaked to media shows the National leader spent nearly $114,000 on travel and accommodation between April and June. Simon Bridges is defending the amount spent, saying his roadshow, which bumped up his travel bill, was an important part of being opposition leader. The expenses are due to be released publicly on Thursday. The Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, says Ministerial Services has assured her no government minister was given information about national MPs.
No one in Labour actually ever had access to that information, and it would be improper if we would have. In fact, the only groups, as I understand, who will have had access will be the opposition themselves and the Speaker.
Details of MPs' expenses are distributed to each party caucus for them to consider before the public release. They can see information about fellow caucus members but not MPs from other parties. Mr Bridges says he's confident none of his MPs leaked against him. On their way into caucus this morning, MPs were asked where it came from.
I wasn't even aware of the information, and I think it's a pretty cheap shot.
I doubt it. We've got a united caucus.
I can't be confident. I can just say that I don't think anyone has an interest. National's polling at 45%.
The senior National MP Judith Collins says she'd be deeply surprised if any member of her caucus deliberately leaked information about the leader's expenses.
Whatever should be done because it's just not acceptable for an opposition leader to be absolutely gazumped and sideswiped like this a week out from the reports being released.
The Speaker of the House, Trevor Mallard, is in charge of Parliamentary Services, which deals with MPs' expenses. He says the leak did not come from his office.
I have indicated that to a number of parties and am going to take 24 hours and take soundings about whether there needs to be a further forensic examination as to the source of the document which was used last night.
Shortly after the Speaker's comments, Mr Bridges came out calling for a full-scale independent inquiry.
By independent, what I mean is it has to be away from the Speaker, from Parliamentary Services and from the government. Be really clear that is no reflection on anyone. I think it's really about protecting reputations.
And what does Judith Collins think should happen to any National MP found to be responsible?
Well, we wouldn't want them around, I would have thought.
From Parliament for Checkpoint, Jane Patterson.
5:29. A Christchurch man has been left stunned after his insurance premium rose by 440% after his insurer decided his property was at high risk from earthquakes. Tower Insurance claims it's all part of its equitable pricing approach, and only 2.5% of its customers will face an annual increase of more than $250. But, as Dan Dalgetty reports, one customer's $10,000 hike came from out of the blue.
The 2011 earthquake is still causing problems for Canterburyans 7 years on. Strohan homeowner Roy Howell, whose property sustained minor damage in the quakes, was shocked to discover Tower was going to increase his insurance premiums from $2,300 to $12,843 a year.
Tower have decided that instead of spreading the risk, that people in high risk areas are going to pay the high premium. After 30 years, you've just come out and just sent me an email without any heads up. I said, well, it's just unacceptable. I just can't believe that you expect somebody to fork out another $870 a month. You know, this will break a lot of people. People are not expecting this.
Mr Howell says Tower engaged a risk management company which deemed his area as being high risk. He says his property is on TC2 land, meaning there is a possibility of minor to moderate land damage resulting from liquefaction, a designation shared by most homes in Christchurch.
No more risk than being in Dallington or New Brighton or Redcliffe or Sumner or up the hill in Mount Pleasant. You know, I put it to them, we're actually in Canterbury. Can I live without having risk? And they couldn't answer that because there is no answer. You know, we live in a high-risk area all over Canterbury.
Another Cantabrian who is insured with Tower is earthquake claims advocate Mel Burke, who says the insurer indicated it was going to use a risk-based price model. She says it's a sign Tower is trying to price itself out of the market.
There's certain properties that for Tower that they would prefer to have them off their books. If we were looking at a truly risk-based model, then it has to take into account in New Zealand not just earthquake but a number of other things, and that's not being applied. So if we looked as to the underlying motive, to me it looks like removing a certain property type off its books that it sees as a risk to its current financial position.
Mel Burke can relate to the stress which Tower's customers, such as Roy Howell, are under.
I would put the house that we own in a category that's not hugely dissimilar. It's single story, but it's not hugely dissimilar to the property in Strohan. It's on TC3 land, so in theory it would be a high-risk property. So it's kind of interesting how Tower would be making its decision as to which property is $10,000 a year to insure and which one is $3,000.
Roy Howell says his property suffered only minor damage in the quakes. Meanwhile, Consumer New Zealand's head of research, Jessica Wilson, says home insurance premiums have risen 140% over the past decade. She says insurers have had to rethink their policies.
Other insurers have indicated they're moving to take into account risk in their premiums as well, although not to the extent that Tower has. State and AMI said that they were moving to increase premiums in areas that were prone to earthquake or floods. So their customers will be seeing increases, but not, according to the company, the $10,000 price hike.
Jessica Wilson says it looks as though Tower is sending a clear message to Mr Howell, but hopes other companies don't follow suit.
Premium increases of $10,000 are basically the insurer saying it doesn't want to provide cover in this area. And when that happens, it reduces the choice for consumers and their ability to shop around because there are just fewer options available. Our other concern is that if other insurers adopt Tower's stance and impose similar hikes, then cover will become unaffordable.
Tower, the country's third largest insurer, declined a request for an interview but referred us to a statement released in March which said the vast majority of its customers would not see any significant change in premiums, with less than 2.5% receiving an annual increase of more than $250. It added most of its customers facing increases were in high-risk locations, such as Wellington, Napier and Gisborne. The statement makes no mention of Christchurch. Mr Howell says he's found another insurance company and says he'll be paying hundreds of dollars less per month than Tower was asking. The Insurance Council says it doesn't hold any data on how many customers it has in Christchurch. In Ototahi for Checkpoint, ko Dan Dalgetty, TNA.
You're with Checkpoint on RNZ. Thank you for being with us. Coming up on the program, police investigate claims Deputy Commissioner Wally Homaha contacted a witness to a bullying incident. He was involved in Turkey's currency, is in free fall. And should supermarkets allow BYO plastic containers at the deli? We'd love your feedback on school bus drivers earning $17.68, the Ministry of Education, and whether it should have some say on what school bus drivers are earning. Tower insurance premiums, MP's expenses, Simon Bridges, who's leaking. If you were the person, do feel free to contact us. You can text us on 2101. Madison's next with business news, but first Katrina with the moderately late 5:30 headlines.
A former advisor in the kingitanga, Tuku Morgan, has attacked the Maori King Tuheitia for his leadership skills, calling him a puppet and a poor communicator. In his email, Mr Morgan lashes out at the King's chief advisor, Rangi Whakaruru, criticising his high salary, his spending and his management. Mr Morgan says he wrote the remarks after the King criticised him at a recent iwi chairs dinner. The Serious Fraud Office is currently investigating the Kingitanga's Urarangi Trust. Carlos Pula has walked free from the High Court in Auckland after the jury found him not guilty of a one-punch manslaughter. The Crown argued Mr Pula was angry at being punched by another party goer in August last year and took his anger out on Reginald Sharma. But Mr Pula's lawyer said it was dark, everyone had been drinking and the two eyewitnesses couldn't be sure of what they said they saw. The New Zealand First MP, Shane Jones, is criticising the police for dribbling information to the media over the Wally Homaha inquiry. An investigation into Mr Homaha's appointment as Deputy Police Commissioner is due to begin next week. The police are also investigating claims Mr Homaha contacted a witness to a bullying incident he was involved in. Judith Collins says it would be very surprising if anyone in her national caucus deliberately leaked information about the leader's expenses. Simon Bridges wants a full independent inquiry into who leaked details of his nearly $114,000 travel and accommodation bill. All National MPs have denied responsibility. The Speaker says the document was in a format that means it could not have come from his office. A Christchurch man suspects Tower Insurance is trying to freeze some properties out of the market by increasing premiums in high-risk areas. Roy Howell's premium shot up to more than $12,000 a year after Tower said his property was at a bigger risk from earthquakes. He's now changed his insurer and is paying much less. Those are the headlines. I'm back at 6.
Thank you very much indeed, Katrina Batten. Let's turn to business news now with Madison Reedy. Hi, Madison.
Hello.
Spark has signed another major sports content deal. So what does all of this mean? What's their strategy here?
So you may remember earlier in the year, in April, they won the broadcasting rights, basically nabbed it from Sky Television for the Rugby World Cup in 2019, so next year in Japan. So they have the exclusive rights for that. And then today they announced
They've got the exclusive rights to all the games, right? The Rugby World Cup's games.
Entire tournament.
And TVNZ's getting some of them, right?
Yeah, so it was done in a deal with Television New Zealand. This one announced today wasn't. So they have won the broadcasting rights exclusively to themselves. I even spoke to the Chief Executive Simon Muta today, and he said that this is in no partnership with anybody else, it's exclusively theirs, and that's to the Premier League football. And they've also won the rights to rebroadcast Manchester United television.
Holy moly. Right, Madison, now you and I haven't had any preamble here, so I don't know if you're going to be able to answer these questions, and if you can't, I apologise unreservedly.
Give it a go.
Give it a yeah. Well, look, so do you have to be a Spark subscriber to watch this stuff?
No. So all of this is going to be aired on Spark's own platform. So that was also announced in the fine print today. They're going to have their own specific sports streaming platform. So as you probably know, they already have Lightbox, so that's like a Netflix subscription service.
Which had the Handmaid's Tale, I think.
Which is great.
Fantastic, yeah.
But this one will be specifically for sports, and that obviously comes with, a lot of other issues because it needs to be live streamed, the demand's a lot higher and all of that. So this basically signals that they are going to go really aggressive at that sports broadcasting market.
If you're not a Spark subscriber, if you're not a Spark customer, is it pay-for-view? I'm getting complex here, aren't I?
So I asked all of those questions today. They have no answers on pricing yet. So they've announced a new executive who's actually come over from TVNZ, a former director of content, Jeff Latch, to head up their now called Spark Sport team, a team of 6. And they're working on creating that platform at the moment, but they haven't made any decisions on pricing yet. But Simon Muta did say that it will be also based on people who maybe want to watch one game or want to watch one particular tournament or one type of sports, there will be lots of options, and they'll be going up against Sky's Fan Pass for rugby.
Which is going to put more pressure on Sky because they are charging a flat rate per month.
So one would assume that pricing would be competitive.
Right, gosh, this is fascinating. Boy, what a business. I remember when Channel 2 started. We've had an update on CBL Corporation this afternoon. What happened?
So it actually came out of the Auckland High Court this afternoon. So the Financial Markets Authority put this case forward alongside, well, not necessarily against, but with the voluntary administrators of CBL Corporation. Now, CBL is this embattled insurer that has been placed into voluntary administration, and Korda Mentha, Brendan Gibson and Neil Jackson have been appointed to administrate this company. And everything's all up in the air in the moment. The SFO is investigating it, as is the Reserve Bank, which moved to liquidate it in about February, its insurance arm, because it didn't think that it could, that it had the money to cover insurance claims. So the FMA brought this case with Korda Mentha administrators to the Auckland High Court because it just wanted to clarify whether or not these voluntary administrators were still required to disclose information about this company in regards to stock market rules, even though it was in administration. So there wasn't too much clarity on that. And the court has actually ruled this afternoon. The judge said no, citing the Companies Act. The judge said the disclosure and reporting obligations of an issuer in voluntary administration are contained within the Companies Act. And while the issuer is in administration, the continuous disclosure obligations are suspended.
Right.
So bottom line is creditors and shareholders will probably just have to wait longer because these administrators don't have to tell the FMA.
Boy, this has been a maze, hasn't it?
So it's a wait and see still.
Yeah, thank you. What happened on the markets today?
The markets, the top 50 index rose nearly about 0.33% by 27 points to close at 8972. The New Zealand dollar is trading at just a hair under 66 US cents, and it actually hit just above 66 US cents in late trading after a volatile few days. And we're also trading at 90.7 to the Australian and 51.7 British pence.
Madison Reedy, thank you very much indeed, Madison. Really appreciate it. We'll have more on what the Turkish currency is doing a bit later in Checkpoint. But before that, the police are investigating claims the Deputy Police Commissioner, contacted a witness to a bullying incident he was involved in. Wally Homaha's appointment to the role is also the focus of an independent inquiry. We've heard a lot about that over the past couple of weeks, due to get underway in less than a week. Here's our Deputy Political Editor, Chris Bramwell.
Wally Homaha's appointment in June has been surrounded by controversy. Comments he made in 2004 defending 3 police officers accused of rape were made public, and allegations he bullied women he worked with were raised in Parliament last week. The New Zealand Herald today published claims Mr Homaha contacted a witness to one of the bullying incidents. National's police spokesperson Chris Bishop says if true, that is essentially a form of witness tampering.
It's all very well for the Prime Minister to say there's an inquiry underway, but when allegedly someone is actually interfering in the process of that inquiry, that's a very serious matter.
The Deputy Prime Minister Winston Peters says the Herald's latest claims are unadulterated drivel.
It's not true. That's why I know in what respect it was false, and it's headlining the front page.
How would you know it's not true?
Because I got legal information.
The New Zealand First MP Shane Jones says there's a mare's nest in the police. He says the fact that so much information is dribbling out to the media from the police does not reflect well on the agency.
There's a lot of pressure there at the cops at the moment, but I don't know of a single MP who feels relaxed about the frequency of these leaks. And if I have the opportunity to reflect those concerns to the Commissioner, I will, because people are concerned out in the community. They've raised it with me.
The Labour MP and former head of the Police Association, Greg O'Connor, says Wally Homaha got to where he is on merit and doesn't believe it's a boys' club at Police HQ.
Look, I've known Wally for some time. I haven't actually worked directly with him, but you don't really get your way up through levels. Every promotion you get, you go through fairly heavy scrutiny. So we'll just wait and see what comes out in the inquiry.
Winston Peters says it was a National Party appointed police commissioner that gave Mr Homaha his first serious promotion in 2012.
It was another National Party Commissioner of Police that again gave Homaha his second most important promotion. I would have expected all the details that we are talking about now to be a part of the appointment process back then.
Winston Peters was asked whether Wally Homaha was a friend of his.
Well, this is irrelevant. I'm not answering those questions because your paper believes in specious rubbish like this morning, where it said, for example, that I spoke at his last promotion. The police asked me to, not him. I turned up as a guest of the process, about 1,000 others did, from all political parties, and all of a sudden now I'm being condemned for turning up and being asked to make a speech, and I made one.
The Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern says she's hugely frustrated with the situation the government has found itself in.
I am and I remain that way, but it's for me to make sure that we deal with this properly and appropriately. I do want to bring in some independence to that process, and that's what I've done.
Jacinda Ardern says if the inquiry comes back showing the government did not have the information it needed when the appointment was made, then the matter will be referred to the State Services Commissioner and the Solicitor General. The Police Minister Stuart Nash refused to be interviewed by Checkpoint today or say if Mr Homaha was turning up for work. Atu I te whare pārimata mō te hōtaka o te ahi pōnei, ko Chris Bramalaho.
And our invitation to Minister Nash remains open. In the latest controversy out of Donald Trump's White House, an ugly clash has broken out between the President and a former aide, Omarosa Newman. It involves an explosive tell-all book, secret recordings, and a now torrent of insults and what seems like a revival of the boss-villain roles they played in the reality series The Apprentice, where they first met. Here's the BBC's John Sopel.
Omarosa Manigot Newman had zero policy expertise and absolutely no political experience when she was appointed by Donald Trump to be one of his senior advisors at the White House. But she had been on The Apprentice, the reality TV show that he'd hosted. They were the perfect coupling.
I like Omarosa. Omarosa's a good person.
She's also black in a White House that lives up to its name as being, well, very white.
Donald Trump is a con.
And with her firing and book that she's now touting, the reality TV genre has come to the White House. In the book, she accuses the president of being a racist and misogynist. He fired back.
Lowlife. She's a lowlife.
But revenge is a dish best served cold, and she has planned this all out, extraordinarily with a tape of her firing by Chief of Staff John Kelly.
Can I ask you a couple of questions? Is the president aware of this?
Let's not go down the road. This is a non-negotiable discussion.
I don't want to negotiate. I've never had a chance to talk to you, General Kelly. Yeah, so if this is my departure, I'd like to have at least an opportunity to understand.
We can talk another time. This has to do with some pretty serious integrity violations.
That drew gasps in the West Wing. The firing took place in the Situation Room, a place where no recordings are ever allowed. That was yesterday. Today, Omarosa had a new tape to play. Donald Trump feigning ignorance about the dismissal.
Omarosa, what's going on? I just saw on the news that you're thinking about leaving. What happened?
General Kelly came to me and said that you guys wanted me to leave.
No, nobody even told me about it. Nobody. Wow. You know, they run a big operation, but I didn't know it. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Damn it. I don't love you leaving at all.
And now Donald Trump has come out swinging. Wacky Omarosa, who got fired 3 times on The Apprentice, now got fired for the last time. She never made it, never will. She begged me for a job, tears in her eyes. I said, OK. The flippant response would be to say, well, this is all good, harmless fun. But this is the West Wing, the nerve centre of the most powerful country on earth. And while dramatists have always sought to depict politics as soap opera, the real thing is coming up with more bizarre plot lines than any scriptwriter would dare imagine.
John Sopel from Washington, the BBC's John Sopel. Of course, lots of feedback coming in on $17.68. You better get Zach to redo the pick and mix. You forgot to take the tax out, says Pete. And another Pete says, hi, John, $17.68 per hour as a school bus driver. Wow, I get $17.50 as a school bus driver. Thank you. We'd love to hear from you if you are a school bus driver. What do you get paid? Let's go to Dunedin, where a hearing to settle disputed facts arising in a case between the Commerce Commission and Silverhorn Limited, producers of Dare Velvet pills, entered its second day. Silverhorn, now known as Gateway Solutions Limited, has pleaded guilty to 26 counts of engaging in conduct liable to mislead for mixing carob, often used as a cocoa substitute, with its Dare Velvet. But as our Otago Southern reporter Timothy Brown is finding out, guilt is not always black and white.
22 batches of Sir Bob Charles Sportsval contained less deer velvet than what was on the label. The remainder topped up with carob. The company admitted that and also pleaded guilty to charges relating to misleading information on its website. Silberhorn's sole director, Ian Carline, has also pleaded guilty to a charge under the Fair Trading Act relating to withholding information from the Commerce Commission, and the company also has a similar charge. This is all established, there's a summary of facts, and it's signed and agreed. But what is in dispute is if there was any intention to mislead the public or if it was an oversight.
I went so far as to say negligence because they knew what was in the capsule, but was it intended to mislead, or was it just because the effect of the capsule was the same as before?
That's prominent Dunedin Defence Counsel Judith Ablett-Kerr QC, and that's the bone of contention. The court heard the Commission has drawn inferences from the summary which is suggestive of intention to commit the crime. Ms Ablett-Kerr says there's no such intention, and intent is not necessary to prove the case against the company. Today the court heard from the company's former communications manager, Susan Hewitt.
We were making the deer velvet batches and we were putting less than the 250 milligram on the label. And Ian believed that the product, the deer velvet, was a better product and that you didn't need as much of it, rather like a concentrate. Although I wasn't happy with it not matching up to the labels, I went ahead with making the capsules to his, what he wanted.
The summary of facts is not available to the media, and much of the first day of the hearing involved disputes between counsel. During the second day, Judge Kevin Phillips adjourned the matter early after continued issues with the court's recording system.
I'm very sorry about this, but it's totally beyond me. When the court was done up, all the gear in this courtroom is new. It's state-of-the-art ministry speak, so let's say 2008, 2009, and it's never worked in here. That's the problem.
The products are now produced and marketed by Pacific Biotech, a company directed by Ian Carline's son, Roger. The hearing will continue in another courtroom tomorrow morning, where it's hoped technology will not be an issue. In the Dunedin District Court for Checkpoint, Timothy Brown.
Thousands of Yemenis have attended a mass funeral for the children killed in an airstrike by the Saudi-led coalition last week. The strike hit a school bus in the northern town of Sada, which is held by Houthi rebels. 29 children aged between 6 and 11 were among the more than 40 people killed. 29 children. They were on a field trip, and video footage taken just before the airstrike hit shows them jostling and yelling excitedly, getting ready for the day ahead. The BBC's international correspondent Orla Guerin reports.
Coffin after coffin borne aloft. The unbearable weight of the lightest bodies. Little boys killed on their school bus. These are the victims of what Saudi Arabia has called a legitimate airstrike against Houthi rebel fighters. But it was youth and innocence being buried here today. Even for Yemenis inured to bloodshed and suffering, this is a devastating loss. And on the streets of the rebel stronghold of Sada, grief and rage against the Saudis and their Western allies. Your brutality has been exposed to the world, said the rebel leader Mohammed al-Houthi, and this crime will not be forgotten. But the outcry in Yemen is not echoed by the British government.
Our silence on this is deadly for Yemeni civilians. It basically suggests to the Saudi and Emirati-led coalition that they continue doing whatever they want with total impunity. So far from the UK government, all we've had is a solitary tweet. A tweet from a Minister of State saying, we express concern about the deaths of 29 children, and that's a disgrace. We should be out there condemning this.
Britain backs the Saudi-led coalition which intervened in Yemen 3 years ago to restore the internationally recognised government to power. There are UK personnel in the coalition's command and control centre. The Ministry of Defence says it's a very small number and they have a purely advisory role. But Britain is one of the major arms suppliers to Saudi Arabia. And campaigners say the value of arms sales to the Saudis has increased by almost 500% since the conflict began. Over the past 3 years, that trade has earned Britain around £4.6 billion. The Saudi-led coalition has promised to investigate the carnage on the school bus, which amounts to investigating itself. Experts say don't expect the probe to produce any changes and don't expect London and Washington to lean on Riyadh.
Britain and even the United States have a limited ability to put pressure on the Saudi authorities, in public at least, because at the moment Riyadh is extremely touchy. The Middle East as a whole is fairly unstable, and these are very important contracts for US and particularly British firms at a time when the aviation industry in particular is under a lot of pressure in the UK.
For Zayed Tayyib, all that matters is that 3 of his sons are gone. Brothers killed side by side and now buried that way. As Zayed was saying his goodbyes, we asked the government for an interview. No minister was available.
Orla Guerin from the BBC with that report. It's 5 minutes to 6. Should supermarkets allow BYO plastic containers at the deli? So this isn't shopping bags, but containers inside the store. A Wellington shopper has been left frustrated after staff at a Countdown deli told her the reusable containers she'd brought with her was no longer allowed. Emma Shee says she's always taken her own container for food, like shaved ham, for example. But as Jessie Chang reports, the supermarket chain says it's not about cutting back on plastic, but more about food safety.
Making environmentally friendly choices is something Emma Shee tries to do when she's out shopping, particularly at the supermarket. But last week she was surprised when she wasn't allowed to use her own container at the deli.
The girl at the deli said, "Oh, they've got a new rule saying that they're not allowed to accept people's containers anymore because they're worried that people will get sick not from their products but from not cleaning their own containers properly."
Emma Shee says these kinds of barriers stop people from doing their bit to reduce the use of plastic.
It's letting us become complacent and to just keep doing what we always do, which is just use these single-use plastics. And recycling isn't the ultimate solution because you're still expending resources to recycle things.
In a statement, Countdown says it has a responsibility to make sure all the food it sells is safe for customers. It says while it understands and appreciates that some customers want to bring their own containers, that has to be balanced with its overarching obligation to guarantee food safety. But supermarket company Foodstuffs, which owns New World, Pack and Save and Foursquare, has a trial at one of its stores, allowing customers to bring their own containers for meat and seafood. New World Howick has been carrying out the trial for the past 2 months. Its owner Brendan Jones says he's had an overwhelmingly positive response.
We've had customers saying, great, you're preserving the environment for future generations, but we've had other people say it's great not to have our rubbish bins, our recycle bins loaded with the plastic or even the smells from butchery and seafood come out.
Brendan Jones says expanding the BYO containers to the deli section is tricky, but they're not ruling it out.
Service deli primarily is already cooked and ready to eat products, like, for example, sliced meats and salads. Whereas if you look at the butchery and the seafood, 99.9% of those items are really there to be taken home, cooked and consumed, so it makes quite a difference from a food safety point of view.
2 days ago, the government announced its plans to phase out single-use plastic bags by July next year. Trevor Craig from the Bin Inn says its customers are encouraged to bring their own containers, and he says stores are well on their way to getting rid of plastic bags. The specialty grocery chain sells mainly dry whole foods, often in bulk. But Mr Craig says phasing out plastic for packaged meat would be difficult for other supermarkets.
There's a lot more to that, a lot more research required, and you're not going to see an answer to that in any time soon because of you have to be careful of protection of food and so on once it's sold and goes into what sort of container. Countdown
says a container ban is currently policy, but it's a space that's evolving and changing. Mo te hōtaka o te ahiahi, Kōdisi Chang tēnei.
1 minute before 6 o'clock, Katrina is just arriving behind me with the news. Lots of feedback coming in. Bus and truck drivers require considerable training and high levels of skill and responsibility. This listener says, why do employers believe it's acceptable to pay these drivers unlivable wages? Driving school buses would be particularly difficult and stressful due to some people's behaviour. Yes. John, drivers are in charge of $300,000 machines, people's safety, driving busy traffic, rowdy, disruptive passengers, etc. Their pay rate in no way reflects their responsibility. And James asks, and that hourly rate of $70.68 is before tax, right? Yes, it is, James. We're also hearing lots and lots of feedback on couriers. Sheila talking about her experience of rural delivery now. Thank you for that. We're going to follow up a couple of the issues you raise. We are also drilling into the forensics of this. The courier companies tell us no one is earning less than the minimum wage. Drivers keep telling us they are. So we're going to establish factually, forensically, what exactly drivers are earning after their costs, and that's coming up on Checkpoint in the next couple of days. But right now it's time for the pips, then the news.
RNZ News at 6. Kia ora, good evening. Ko Katrina Bat in Aho. A former advisor in the kingitanga has unleashed an unprecedented attack on the Maori King Tuheitia. Tuku Morgan has written a scathing email criticising King Tuheitia's leadership skills, calling him a puppet and a letdown. Our Māori News correspondent Lee Marama McLaughlin reports.
In the 3-page email, Tuku Morgan says King Tuheitia is a poor orator and that support for the kingitanga is declining under his reign. He also says the king is a puppet, being manipulated by his chief advisor, Rangi Whakaruru. Mr Morgan criticises Mr Whakaruru's high salary, which he says is $250,000, and also says he got huge loans and wasted money. He says he wrote the email after the king criticised him at a recent iwi chairs dinner. The Ururangi Trust is currently being investigated by the Serious Fraud Office, and the king or his representatives would not comment. It comes at a time where the kingitanga should be celebrating, just days before their annual coronation celebrations in Ngaruawahia. I'm Lee Marama McLaughlin.
National is demanding a full independent inquiry into a leak about MP's expenses. The focus was its leader, Simon Bridges' nearly $114,000 travel and accommodation bill. Parliamentary Service sent the information out to the Speaker's office and the National Party whips ahead of the public release. No other political party had access to that information, and the Speaker says the formatting of the leaked document means it could not have come from his office. Simon Bridges says an investigation is in order.
The reason I think this is very important isn't about me. I don't think it's about the opposition. I think it's ultimately about the fact that a leak such as this potentially affect all members of Parliament, and we all have an obligation, a duty, and in fact a right, I think, to feel free from these things.
Simon Bridges says he's confident none of his MPs leaked against him. The New Zealand First MP, Shane Jones, has taken a swing at the police over information being leaked to the media, saying it's a mare's nest. His comments come less than a week before Wally Homaha's appointment as Deputy Police Commissioner is before an independent inquiry. The police are also investigating claims Mr Homaha contacted a witness to a bullying incident he was involved in. Shane Jones says the fact that so much information is dribbling out to the media from the police doesn't reflect well on them. Tomorrow's teacher strike is forcing thousands of parents to take the day off work or make other arrangements for their children. Principals expect the strike will close most primary and intermediate schools, affecting more than 400,000 children. Our education correspondent John Gerritsen reports.
Principals groups say very few schools have enough non-union staff to provide supervision for children tomorrow, and most are closing. Wellington parents have told RNZ News they're taking a day off work to look after their children, though some are using grandparents or programs provided by after-school care groups. One father says he'll be taking his children to the strike to support the teachers. The Educational Institute says collective agreement negotiations for teachers and principals are scheduled to resume next week. Ko John Gerritsen tēnei.
A Hamilton-based bus company now says some of its drivers are earning a little over $17 an hour. 120 Go Bus drivers from Hamilton, Otarahanga and Te Awamutu have been striking today over what they say are unfair pay and conditions. Go Bus Chief Operating Officer Nigel Piper had earlier disputed claims drivers are being paid as little as $17 an hour. Mr Piper told Checkpoint some drivers are being paid more than that.
We've got drivers earning $17.35 an hour who are new entrant drivers, and we have school drivers earning $17.68.
Nigel Piper from Go Bus. A Christchurch man says Tower Insurance may be trying to freeze high-risk properties out of the market by raising premiums. The country's third biggest insurer is using a fully risk-based approach, meaning hikes for people in areas with more risk of natural disasters. Roy Howe's premium shot up 440% to more than $12,000 after Tower decided his Strohan property is at a higher risk from earthquakes. Mr Howe says Tower needs to have another look at its policy as this is out of order. He's paying considerably less since changing his insurer. Tower has declined to comment. Researchers in Britain have found evidence that e-cigarettes may be more harmful than previously thought. A study by the University of Birmingham and funded by the British Lung Foundation has found preliminary evidence that vaping could cause long-term lung damage. Researcher Aaron Scott says they looked at the effects of vaping on cells that are important to the immune response in the airways.
Using e-cigarettes kills these cells and it generates an inflammatory environment within the lung. Also prevents these cells from engulfing and digesting these bacteria or pathogens. When you vaporize e-cigarette fluid, you change the chemical composition and it makes it much more harmful.
Aaron Scott says further work is needed to fully understand the effects of vapour exposure, but vaping is still believed to be much safer than smoking, especially in terms of cancer risk. It's 6:05. Sport. The Black Ferns coach Glenn Moore is confident his team is prepared for the atmosphere that will greet them for this weekend's test against Australia in Sydney. The first of two tests for the Laurie O'Reilly Memorial Trophy will be played at the 83,000 capacity ANZ Stadium prior to the Bledisloe Cup opener between the All Blacks and the Wallabies. Moore says the world champion Black Ferns are well and truly prepared for the occasion.
We've already discussed that. We've just got to be focused on doing our job really, really well, and doing that, it's all about our preparation through now to then. And once we get out on that ground, we've just got to have absolute focus. And, everyone's aware that it could be noisy and an electric atmosphere, but the focus just has to be there.
Glenn Moore. The Warriors have named an unchanged team for Sunday's clash against the Bulldogs, which could further cement the Auckland club's place in the NRL top 8. Coming off back-to-back wins, the Warriors are 7th on the ladder and 2 wins clear of the 9th-placed Tigers with 3 rounds to play. Captain Roger Tuivasa-Sheck, who's in red-hot form, will make his 50th appearance against the Bulldogs in Sydney. And the New Zealand driver, Scott Dixon, says his hunger to win is as strong as ever after extending his 17-year stint at Chip Ganassi Racing with a new multi-year contract. Dixon has won 4 IndyCar Series titles and needs this year's competition with only 4 races remaining, but says there's still plenty of room for improvement.
I guess in the long run, I still feel like I'm learning a lot. As a driver and as the way I think there's always areas that I can improve.
Scott Dixon, that's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Nick Bollinger samples the new album from Dudley Benson. We have a wind on the word of Hanoi, Vietnam. And our After Dinner speaker, astronomer Alan Gilmore, offers advice on how to read a sky chart as opposed to a star chart, which he probably wouldn't want to be seen dead with.
But Dr. McLean is not just an eco-warrior. He works at Massey University at the Centre for Public Health Research. Surely the research on glyphosate must back it up, otherwise he wouldn't say it.
Yeah, I was concerned that he was making it, and that's the reason why I'm on the air now.
That's Lately with Karen Hay, 10 p.m. weeknights on RNZ National.
Met service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Northland to Waitomo, including Coromandel Peninsula Bay of Plenty, Taupo and Taumaranui. Showers, some heavy and squally today, with westerly gales this evening. Showers easing tomorrow, then becoming confined to the west coast. Taranaki to Manawatu, including Taihape, rain developing this afternoon with heavy and possibly thundery falls. Rain easing to showers late tomorrow morning, then retreating to higher ground. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, scattered showers. Wairarapa, Kapiti and Wellington, also Buller, Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury. Areas of rain gradually clearing from the south tomorrow. Westland and Fiordland, occasional rain clearing from Westland this evening but returning late tomorrow. Otago and Southland, scattered rain clearing this evening or overnight, mainly fine tomorrow. And for the Chatham Islands, mostly cloudy, light rain for a time tomorrow. It is coming up to 9 minutes past 6 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thanks, Katrina. Lots of people are sending in feedback about taking your own containers to the deli or whatever at the supermarket.
I think it's a brilliant idea.
Yeah. Well, actually, but this is, boy, I'd forgotten this. Years ago, the butcher used to weigh out ham, etc., on greaseproof paper and put it in a paper bag.
Yes.
We both remember that, don't we?
Exactly, yeah.
Why don't they do that anymore?
I don't know. Why don't they do that anymore? We should be asking.
Right.
Plastic is used everywhere.
There's lots of feedback, lots of people saying, actually, it's ridiculous. You should be able to take your own containers to the supermarkets. Thank you. It's really nice to hear from you. For the first time in 24 years, parents around the country are figuring out what to do with several 100,000 primary and intermediate school children who have no school tomorrow because of a teachers' strike. Principal groups are expecting the action will force most schools to close entirely, with just a few offering supervision for a limited number of children. Some parents say they're taking a day off work, others have found childcare, and a few are even taking their children to join the teachers in their protest marches. Here's our education correspondent, John Gerritsen.
At Wellington's Mount Cook School, parents have Wednesday's strike covered. Tim says it actually suits him to take the day off.
I'll take the day off, but I'm fortunate enough to work for myself and have worked all weekend, about 30 hours in 2 days, so I'm stuffed and need a day off anyway.
Sharon says her 2 girls will be staying home, but not with her.
My husband Duncan is taking the day off of annual leave tomorrow so he can stay at home and look after the kids.
Yeah, how do you feel about it? Is it a bit of a pain or...?
He's looking forward to it. We've also teed up an electrician to come around to the house to do some work, so yeah, it's actually a great opportunity for us to get some stuff done at home.
Other parents say they've made arrangements for the day.
I've got 2 children and Grandma's going to look after them, so I'm all good.
I am between contracts at the moment, so it's fine for me to take the kids for the day.
It's okay for me, I just have the kids at home because I can work from home.
They're going to be in the program that the YMCA is running.
We're having a family day, haven't planned it down to the ground yet, but a great opportunity to have some time as a family, get out, get active.
The parents Checkpoint spoke to are united in their support of the teachers and their cause.
I fully support them. They need to be paid probably twice as much as they get paid now, looking at what they do. So yeah, absolutely.
It's sad that previous governments haven't listened and it's come to this, and that the teachers need more support.
Yeah, I think it should go straight to getting better for the education in New Zealand.
If we want to keep people in the sector, they've got to be paid better.
That sentiment has helped another Wellington parent, Giovanni Tiso, decide how he'll spend the strike day with 2 of his children who are primary school aged.
We'll take them to the march. It seems like the most obvious thing to do for us. People talk about how, we should have more civics education in school. Seems like a great opportunity for a bit of civics education.
And you support the teachers in their bid for higher pay and better working conditions?
Absolutely.
Meanwhile, Paul Golter from the Educational Institute says he hopes tomorrow's strike will prompt the Education Ministry to improve its offer to teachers and principals. He says if that doesn't happen, it will be up to the union's members to decide if they need to take any more action.
We work constantly with our membership in bringing back offers and positions to them. They tell us which way they want it to go, and then we make that happen. And ultimately our members will make that decision, and if they don't like it, I guess we need to think about what are the next steps to try and help the government move its position.
Paul Golter won't say how much the 2 sides have budged in negotiations already, but the talks are scheduled to resume next week. Mō te hōtaka o te ahi, ko John Gerritsen tēnei.
We were talking before about school bus drivers earning $17.68 an hour. That's only when they're driving too. They don't get paid during school holidays. Lots of people contacting us and saying teacher aides don't get paid during school holidays. We're hearing from office staff at school saying they don't get paid during school holidays. Do be in touch with us if you work at a school or for the Ministry of Education in some capacity or other. You are low paid and you don't get paid during the holidays. We would like to hear from you. 2101 is the text number. It's 30 minutes past 6. Most Māori have some rights to land but are constantly coming up against barriers which prevent them from being able to build houses on it. As the land is often communally owned, it can't be used as security on a mortgage. Some of the country's leading housing experts met in South Auckland today to try and find solutions to this long-running issue. Matthew Tunison was at the conference.
1986 and 2013, Māori home ownership rates declined at a higher rate than the general population. In the 2013 census, just 28% of Māori adults own their own home. Housing advocacy organisation Te Matapihi today hosted a wānanga to try and find a solution to what Maori Development Minister Nanaia Mahuta describes as one of the biggest barriers that most whānau face: how to get finance to build on collectively owned Maori land. Te Matapihi chairman Rao Hoskins says most Maori will have shares in one or more land block.
5.5% of Aotearoa is in Māori land ownership, and if you were to ask a Māori person with shares in any of those 60,000 blocks of land, would they like to one day return to their papakainga or to their ancestral land to build, most of them would say yes.
Di Grinnell, the Deputy Chief Executive of Māori Development Ministry Te Puni Kokiri, says this pertains particularly to Māori land in rural New Zealand. She says land can be owned by hundreds of people, and that's something that also needs to be taken into consideration before anyone can start building.
So I might be one of 300 owners on a block. There'll be a decision-making structure such as a group of trustees. So if I want to build there, it's not a matter of just putting my hand up and saying I'd like to build, I'd need a licence to occupy, those sorts of things.
Ms Grinnell says finance comes up time and time again.
A number of groups have had papakainga aspirations, and so we've seen a number built and a number underway, but this barrier is one that comes up. It can delay the progress, and it can also mean that for some people it just feels too difficult, so they withdraw from the process.
At today's wānanga, the room was split into 5 working groups, with each one trying to come up with solutions. Representatives from business consultancy EY added their know-how to the discussion. Social sector lead Hamiora Baukit says some iwi are trying to organise themselves in a way that works for commercial lenders.
If you think about a bank, they will lend to an organisation that can identify itself as the owner. They will lend if they can get their risk managed. They will lend if there's income to cover the principal. I think the difficulties we face is where one of those factors is missing.
However, Mr Baukit says the commercial lenders could consider different policies when it comes to collective land.
Could a bank, for example, lend to an intermediary who then lends on to the individual owners who might want to have housing on a land, but the intermediary provides the security and capability to do that.
Perhaps the government could also become a lender.
There was a time when government agencies in the past did provide equity or financial instruments to help people get into their homes. So perhaps revisiting some of those past settings is a possibility.
EY and Te Matapihi will put together a policy briefing paper based on today's conference for the Māori Development Minister. Ko Matthew Tunis and Aho.
70 minutes past 6, you are with Checkpoint on RNZ. Thank you for being with us and thanks for your feedback. A lot of it coming in tonight. The issue that's really getting you going at the moment is being able to take your own containers to supermarkets, not just your own bags, which is now absolutely what's required. Hi John, about 3 weeks ago I went to Countdown with my own tub and was told it couldn't be used due to food hygiene reasons. I emailed them but no answer. So annoying, says Abby. Chris from Karori says Countdown and any other raw food supplier could surely protect themselves legally against any food contamination concerns by having a standard release form that the buyer has to sign. And actually the same form could be used by everyone, written by Crown Law and made freely available. Perhaps, Chris, says me, extemporising on your excellent suggestion, you could even have a sticker attached to the container absolving the supermarket of responsibility. Perhaps, but it does seem ridiculous. I still want to know why herbs, like a small amount of parsley, a handful of parsley, comes in a plastic coffin. Why is that? Just put a rubber band around the damn stuff. It's absurd. Turkey's currency is in free fall and government attempts to stop the market turmoil appear to have failed as a row with the United States deepens. The Turkish president has accused the US of stabbing his country in the back, although it may well be the front. The US has imposed sanctions on Turkey over its refusal to extradite a jailed US preacher. This is becoming a deep and intractable situation. The BBC's Mark Lowen has this report from Istanbul.
In his 37 years of work, Hakim Akçay has never seen it this bad. He imports all his stock from abroad, and as the Turkish lira plunges, he's making huge losses. From selling 40 pairs a day, he's down to 2 as the currency fall hits his Turkish customers' pockets as well.
Banks used to beg me to give me loans. Now I'm begging to get them.
I'm cancelling my next orders to try and sell what I have here now. And in 3 months, I'll see if I have to close down.
Turkey is now in a full-blown currency crisis, its lira crashing last Friday by 18% and still falling. For long, there were warnings its economy was overheating, fueled by credit and construction. But the collapse was sparked when Donald Trump hit Turkey with sanctions and tariffs over its continued detention of an American pastor. President Erdogan is stoking conspiracy theories among his nationalist base with talk of foreign plots. Rejecting an interest rate rise that could help, he instead hit out at the US.
On the one hand, you're a strategic partner. On the other, you shoot yourself in the foot. On the one hand, you are a partner with us in Afghanistan when everybody else was leaving. You are a partner with us in Somalia. You are a partner in NATO. And on the other hand, you stab your ally in the back. Is this acceptable?
His supporters are rallying behind him, this business group showing off the lira they bought today. The government is framing it as a matter of national survival. Everyone knows this is an economic attack on our country, he says. Trump and America will be destroyed. Turkey will stand tall. The lira crash matters beyond Turkey because other banks, currencies and markets elsewhere in the world have fallen amid fears of contagion. And with President Erdogan warning that the row with the US risks pushing Turkey to seek alternative partners, an unprecedented rift has opened between two NATO allies. Tourists are making hay while the sun shines, as the luxury suddenly becomes affordable. If more holidaymakers are tempted here, it's a small solace amid Turkey's economic woes.
When I was here, then it took me by surprise that lira is that I get so much lira for my euros, but it's great.
We can afford even better restaurant than we did already. Actually, we like the middle standard, and now for tomorrow we will really make a reservation for a really nice Turkish restaurant.
But no such joy for Hakim, closing early and not knowing where his currency will end up tomorrow. Turkey's diplomatic fights and its economic decisions may be made above him, but it's he and 80 million others here who are paying the price.
Mark Lowen there from Istanbul. There are concerns that Turkey's currency problems could spread to Europe. Yesterday, the euro fell to a 13-month low against the US dollar as investors grow concerned about the exposure of European banks to the situation in Turkey. Gosh, we're getting a lot of feedback on the issue of teachers and people who work in education and don't get paid during the holidays, the whole lot. Hi, John. School librarians have a degree plus a postgraduate qualification and don't get paid during school holidays, says Dale. Thanks Dale, this person says it's outrageous. I never knew that school office staff were not paid in the holidays. These are already low paid jobs and they are overwhelmingly performed by women too, I bet. I'm a teacher at a prestigious high school. All of our staff, teaching and non, is overworked and undervalued. Our librarian is a phenomenal resource, both intellectually and emotionally for our students. She has a master's but only gets paid half of what other librarians do, and only for 40 weeks of the year. We will continue to lose quality staff to other industries. Good evening, says this person. I trained 30 years ago at a teachers' college, so I have a diploma rather than a degree, so I get paid under 60k. I want pay parity with degree teachers who get 76k. Gosh, I hadn't thought about that. It was a diploma qualification, wasn't it? Thank you. Yes, librarians have the EQ. School librarians, by golly, because when a kid's having a tough time, they obviously go to those. They often go to the library at lunch times, right? As well as using it for schoolwork and research, but often they're counsellors too. 40 weeks of the year, no holidays, postgrad qualification. Thank you for your emails, as depressing as they are. Someone also pointing out that there's actually more carbon dioxide from a paper bag than from a plastic bag. That's the problem with this audience. You all know so much. I bet if I told you the earth was flat, dozens of you would email in with proof it was round. But so much for the argument about using paper bags for the ham rather than taking your own container. Paper bags produce more carbon dioxide than plastic, says May. Thanks, mate. It's nice to hear from you. People living with multiple sclerosis are being denied drugs that could improve their lives and slow the disease down under Pharmac's current rules. Another Pharmac story. Those with the disease and their advocates say Pharmac's criteria to access treatments are out of date and not backed up by the latest science. Laura Dooney reports.
Brendan Rochford has been taking to Sabri for 3 years to help slow down the effects of MS. But Pharmac earlier this year declined his application to renew funding because he wasn't able to walk 500 metres, just one of the eligibility criteria the Crown entity sets.
It's almost as though the plug has been pulled on me unnecessarily early. I feel that I've got plenty more time to be working and to be a member of society that doesn't need to pull on the public purse to get by. And I'm not sure how long that will continue without the medication that I'm on.
The Auckland man has to prove he can walk half a kilometre to get the $25,000 the drugs cost each year. Mr. Rochford's been able to get the drug straight from the company that sells it on a compassionate basis, but he's worried about others. So is Multiple Sclerosis New Zealand, which has been pushing Pharmac to change the criteria. People have to have suffered a recent significant relapse to qualify, but if their condition worsens, such as to the extent they can't walk 500 metres, they're cut off. MSNZ wants the criteria changed so patients qualify for the treatments when they are diagnosed and can stay on them for longer. Vice President Neil Woodham says the current criteria are not based on the latest research.
And clearly, as Brendan has indicated, you may not be able to walk 500 metres, but you continue to be employed. And by taking people off the drug at that point, it is inevitable that the MS will progress, and in due course people won't be able to work.
Mr. Woodham says in Australia people continue to get the drugs until it's clear they're not getting any benefit from them.
We are denying people access to drugs who will benefit the most, and we risk, by taking them off, their disease progressing to a stage where, one, they may well need to go into a wheelchair, but also, they will not be able to work.
Neil Woodham says Pharmac is listening to the organisation's pleas, but is constrained by budget. Australian neurologist Helmut Butzkoven helped MSNZ make its case to Pharmac earlier this year.
The issue is that the Pharmac criteria for starting and stopping disease-modifying drugs in MS are too restrictive, and they are old. They're not based on modern evidence.
He says Sabri and other treatments help stop cumulative damage from new lesions in the brain, eye or spine.
Now, with things such as MRI scanners, we've been able to be sure earlier, and therefore we believe that people should access medication when they have the most to lose.
Professor Butzkoven says modern evidence shows the drugs available in New Zealand slow the disease down. In the meantime, Brendan Rochford's hoping Pharmac will change its rules.
All we want is to be able to support ourselves and to be able to continue the same lives that everyone else has got. If you take away our medication for whatever funding reasons you've got, admittedly you're going to save the price of the medication for that year. But how long before I need more help? How long before I'm able to complete working? How long before I need to be a drain on a different public purse?
Pharmac says it's considering the funding applications from Multiple Sclerosis New Zealand around widened access for MS treatments. It will seek advice from its primary clinical committee in November this year and use that advice as part of its assessment process for funding applications. For Checkpoint, ko Laura Dooney tēnei.
It's the most excellent feedback coming in. The world isn't round, it's spherical. Someone's saying you're going to miss us, John. Yes, I will. Even the pedants. And paper bags may produce more CO2, but they don't fill the oceans with residue that effectively never disappears, says Tommy. That's a good point, Tom. Finally tonight, a peaceful boat cruise along the Seine is one of the most popular ways to see Paris, but now there's something which really may spoil the experience. Bright red open-air urinals have been placed in parts of the French capital to try and stop people peeing on the streets. But the eco-friendly devices aren't everyone's liking. CNN's Linda Kincaid has the story.
Oh, the sights of Paris. Tourist boats float down the River Seine, its banks lined with iconic landmarks and historic streets. But it's a new addition to the city's scenery that has many residents peeved. It's the view of a loo. City officials have installed open-air urinals, one not far from the Notre Dame Cathedral, in places where public urination is a problem. For many locals, painting the receptacles red and putting a flower box on them doesn't do much to hide a very public privy.
I think installing a urinal in the streets of Paris for those who don't respect their surroundings is a good idea. But in my opinion, this model is not attractive at all. And where it's been set up is not appropriate at all.
The city says the devices are eco-friendly since they turn the waste into compost for parks and gardens. Neighbours and businesses, though, say there's nothing pretty about them and have written to the town hall to demand their removal.
It is definitely a desirable and historic neighbourhood, but seeing people urinating right in front of your door is not the nicest thing.
With 4 potties around Paris and a 5th being planned, there's no relief in sight for some residents who believe some moments are best behind closed doors.
The report from CNN ending Checkpoint for tonight. Thank you so much for your feedback. There's a lot of you contacting us about your employment conditions in your various roles in the Ministry of Education. We're going to call some of you back. We really appreciate hearing from you. We do relish the audience engagement on Checkpoint. Thank you so much, and we hope you will join us again tomorrow night from 5.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Tuku Morgan has launched a stinging attack on the Maori King Tuheitia's leadership and skills. National is demanding an independent inquiry into how details were leaked of leader Simon Bridges' travel expenses. Shane Jones says it's not a good look for the police to have information dribbling out to the media over the upcoming inquiry into Wali Homaha's appointment. And tomorrow's primary teachers' strike is forcing thousands of parents to take the day off work. Our next news and weather is at 7.
I'm Eva Radic with Pick and Mix on RNZ Concert. 40 years of playing together, and this is how good Strands and Farrar sound. We have their latest album and also a new one from Brazilian Aucklanders Latin Aotearoa.